It's My Nerd World, a Star Wars show, and on this week's episode, one director says it's time to reboot the original Star Wars characters and films. Plus, where did the Star Wars movies and TV shows that were announced in 2020 but never came to fruition, why did that happen, and where did they go? I have details, plus your listener feedback on this week's My Nerd World, a Star Wars show. Thank you so much for checking out the episode. If you want to email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
Welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, a Star Wars show. Thank you so much again for checking out this week's episode. If you're like me, you're enjoying Wars of the Star kind as opposed to the news of the day. Certainly helps for an escape. Speaking of an escape reality, and if you happen to live in the Twin Cities area here in Minnesota, we're doing a meet and greet and book signing at the Starcade in St. Paul on Saturday. This is Saturday the 21st, noon until 2. $15. You can get unlimited gameplay throughout the day, apart from pinball and a few of the other games like skeet ball. However, Escape Reality, come on by. I'm going to be bringing my entire EMBARK science fiction series available for sale and signing. You don't have to buy a book. If you stop on by, you can come by and just say hi. But I will have all the books there, paperback and hardcover, available. And as always, if you want to purchase those directly from me, you can do that by emailing TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. If you want further details about this weekend, drop me an email, and I will shoot you the details. And hopefully, again, if you're in the Twin Cities area, you have a chance to come on by and say hi, do so at the Starcade in St. Paul, and just email me for details in case you missed any of it. All right, let's get to the news this week. Got a couple of really interesting items that came out in the past week.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
First one comes out of Variety. Kingsman and X-Men First Class director Mathew Vaughn appeared on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast and was surprisingly open when asked about his relationship to a handful of major Hollywood franchises. I like Mathew Vaughn as a director. X-Men First Class is probably my favorite X-Men film. I like his Kingsman movies. The first one would be my favorite. The other two, not so much. One of the issues that I have with Mathew Vaughn in some of those non-IP franchise films like Kingsman, those that he made by himself, it's just some of the more gratuitous content that he puts in his movies. However, he has shown that he can just do a straightforward action franchise film in X-Men First Class. That being said, if he were given a chance to do a Star Wars movie, I assume he would do the same and wouldn't inject some of his own personal touches that he does in those original films that he directs. On the podcast, though, he did talk about Hollywood and where things are at the moment, and he said, doing that thing with my fingers, the studios, it's like any artistic form. The music business, movies and fashion, the financing and the commerce has taken over the creative. That always means eventually, for short-term gains, you do well, but the long term, you kill everything. That's what's happening now with film, music, and art. Commerce took over, and now the pendulum is starting to swing back. Creativity should always be the driving force of any decision when you think about how to make money out of it afterwards. If you try to make money up front, you'll kill some great franchises. And for Vaughn, the Star Wars franchise is one that has gone in the wrong direction. When asked if it would be tough for him to turn down an offer to direct a Star Wars movie, the filmmaker said, "Now, not so much. For me, doing a Star Wars movie is to play with the characters I love. If they said to me they'd reboot Star Wars and actually have Luke Skywalker, Solo, and Vader and do your own version of it, everyone would say you're an idiot to try, but that would excite me. Vaughn noted that characters such as James Bond and various superheroes are often rebooted with different characters. Why are the Star Wars characters so hallowed that from 1977 you can't redo it for a new audience, he asked. Star Wars is the Skywalker family, and that's where I think they've gone wrong. They forgot. They've done brilliantly in TV, but it needs a new epic film. That's what I would do. Reboot Luke. Everyone is going to go bat-ass crazy, but let's bring it on. If you want a new generation, make a movie for them. The old generation, hopefully you make it well enough that they would enjoy it. Now, I know that I'm in the minority on this, but I agree with Mathew Vaughn. I'll say up front that it can't happen in the current way that Lucasfilm is telling these stories. They have way too much content that is closely aligned with the original trilogy and those timelines. Now, you could do it, potentially, as long as you kept the storytelling true and it didn't upset any of the canon. Okay. You could go and make an original trilogy that you could essentially just sort of lift out the original trilogy from the, late 70s to the 80s and then just place the other trilogy there instead, and it could still be connected to all the content that has been created around it as long as it didn't do anything to break the canon. And if they were going to go and reboot those films, that's exactly what I would want them to do. I would love to see a modern filmmaking director take on the original Star Wars films. Now, you can argue J.J. Abrams did that with The Force Awakens, and I don't disagree with you. That being said, that original Star Wars movie isn't going to bring in a lot of Gen Zers or those younger that are growing up. This is why Disney is spending so much time creating content, catering to kids, hopefully to bring them along and get them into Star Wars as they get older. Mathew Vaughn's right. Those characters are the core and the essence of what made Star Wars great in the first place, what George Lucas created. To reboot that, I don't think would be sacrilege. The biggest issue is what I mentioned. It's just having it exist and coexist with the material content that continues to be created, since we're currently and just wrapped up Ahsoka, which takes place just a handful of years after the events of Return of the Jedi. Will it happen anytime soon? No, it will not happen anytime soon. In my lifetime? Maybe. We'll see. But I certainly would be on board. I'd even be on board with going in and making sure you keep the story exactly the same and don't break any of the canon storytelling. But I wouldn't mind seeing an update on some of the vehicles and the planets that we go to. Keep it within the Star Wars aesthetic. I'm not saying go wild to make something that doesn't look like Star Wars, but it'd be interesting to actually see a new director, a new artist's vision of an X-Wing or a TIE Fighter, or give us a different version of what the Death Star could be like. Again, do I think it's going to happen? No. Would I like to see it happen? Yeah, absolutely.
This is not going to go the way you think.
Next, we go to comicbookmovie.com. And they write, for many of us, the pandemic has felt like or at least starting to feel like a distant memory. Now, during that time of the pandemic, movie studios were forced to get creative, often hosting virtual events, all in the hope of building buzz for upcoming titles in a world where its biggest stars were confined to Zoom screens. In Disney's case, 2020 ended with a splashy Investor Day, which saw us treated to a Comic-Con level of surprise announcements from the House of Mouse, Marvel Studios, and Lucasfilm. However, in the latter's case, quite a few projects never actually materialized. In a new book at the MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, we hear about how both Kathleen Kennedy and MCU boss Kevin Feige were pressured by Disney into announcing projects before they were ready. We have to believe that it was the ousted CEO Bob Chapek's doing, as both franchises suffered under his brief tenure as the company's leader. So in the case of Star Wars, what happened? Well, the majority of projects did become a reality, but since being unveiled way back in December of 2020, take The Acolyte, for example. It still doesn't have a premiere date, even though the production is wrapped. It's a perfect example of a project announced too soon, resulting in excitement petering out. However, the 4, which failed to become a reality, Rangers of the New Republic, which I'm pretty sure we've seen some of the stories and storytelling that would have taken place in Rangers of the New Republic rolled into The Mandalorian Season 3 and a bit of what we saw in Ahsoka. We also had Lando, A Droid Story, and Rogue Squadron. The latter was meant to be a movie helmed by Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins. The filmmaker even put on a pilot's uniform and posed alongside an X-Wing, hyping up an adventure that we were clearly meant to believe would be a big deal. Not only has it been put on the back burner, Jenkins is believed to have leftover creative differences. Lando was a Disney Plus series set to be spearheaded by Justin Simien, who recently did The Haunted Mansion. Now, Stephen and Donald Glover are producing it as a movie, and the director learned of his firing over social media. Rangers of the New Republic fell by the wayside after Gina Carano left Lucasfilm and Disney. Finally, we have A Droid Story. This was an animated film using realistic CGI that we've heard would revolve around R2-D2 and C-3PO embarking on an adventure together. The last time an update was shared on that was back in 2021. Now, more Star Wars movies and TV shows have happened than those that haven't, but it's hard not to wonder exactly how much damage the presentation did to Lucasfilm's reputation among already disgruntled fans disappointed by the sequel trilogy. You know, and I don't know how much damage it really did. I mean, certainly these have been talking points for podcasts like this, other podcasts, and the core, you know, sort of the heartbeat of the fandom, which is those individuals that listen to shows like this and produce shows like this. It's been frustrating to see so many projects come and go. Rian Johnson's trilogy that never came to fruition. Benioff and Weiss, their potential to do a series of movies and it falling by the wayside. And these are things that were publicly announced. You had Lord and Miller that were doing the solo movie. They get booted. You have Ron Howard comes in and finishes it. You have the cleanup work being done by Tony Gilroy for Rogue One. I mean, apart from The Last Jedi and the first... Actually, you can't even do the first Force Awakens film because that originally had a different writer before J.J. Abrams was brought on. And, of course, we all know what happened with Colin Trevorrow, who was supposed to do his Duel of the Fates version of what Episode 9 ended up becoming The Rise of Skywalker with J.J. Abrams behind it. In terms of the general, movie-going audience, I don't know how much they followed this stuff. But again, for the core fandom, it has been frustrating. And we still don't know what's going to come of these films that were announced just recently, whether it's the next Star Wars saga film, what I'm calling Episode 10, 15 years after The Rise of Skywalker, starring Daisy Ridley. We know that Dave Filoni is supposed to have a film, and we just got done watching Ahsoka, and potentially we'll get an Ahsoka Season 2, a Mando Season 4, and then we'll have this Filoni film that'll wrap up all of the Mandoverse live-action shows, but we don't have a date on that either, nor do we know the status of James Mangold after Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny really kind of failed to catch on with the fandom. I enjoyed it, but I only went to the theater to see it once. I'll buy it when it comes out for purchase. But we don't know what's going on with any of those films either. It still seems as if Lucasfilm and Disney don't know quite how to handle this franchise. I know what they could do. You know, they could just go and reboot the original franchise, like I said before. I don't know.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, let's get to your listener feedback this week. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment up on YouTube as well. Talked quite a bit last week about Ahsoka, specifically that article from The Federalist on paganism in Ahsoka. Got a couple of comments with regard to that. Jonathaniel Weeks writes, "No one will remember this show in 5 years anyway. It doesn't matter. Horrible writing, worst lightsaber choreography I've ever seen. Move on." Perfect example of how subjective art is, because I completely disagree. I love Ahsoka. I'm in the middle of another rewatch, and I plan on wrapping that rewatch up this weekend. And I actually thought the lightsaber choreography in the Ahsoka series is some of the best that we've seen. next to The Rise of Skywalker and The Force Awakens. One of the things I love about The Rise of Skywalker, too, is that it really gives us a lot of lightsaber fights, and it kind of makes up for the fact that Rian Johnson took it a different direction in The Last Jedi. Not complaining, but he did. And I really feel like the lightsaber choreography in the sequel trilogy, and Ahsoka specifically, is far superior than what we even got in the prequel trilogy, which I know is what most people point to, but a lot of the choreography for the lightsaber fights in the prequels, not all of them, but certainly the last battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, and that Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan fight from The Phantom Menace, there's just too many moments in that feel too choreographed, where you can see the moves sort of ahead of time. I really like what they've done, especially in The Rise of Skywalker and in the Ahsoka series. Speaking to the paganism and this type of storytelling always being in Star Wars, David Beckman writes, "You are right, it always has, but classic myth narratives overlap with the true myth of Christianity, as per C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. By the way, I loved Ahsoka, continuation of Rebels." Thank you, David. Great point, and especially that idea of classic myth overlapping with true myth. Per those master storytellers. So thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. Lastly, Elsa Maria Herdervig writes, in response to the greatest Star Wars love story ever told podcast that I did last year, she writes, "It's just baffling how this light touch of fingers in The Last Jedi is the most steamy Star Wars scene ever." And I agree with you. The sequels are my favorite trilogy. I think everything about the sequels is so much better than the originals and the prequels. The acting, the dialogue, the cinematography, she writes, the lightsaber duels. I finally saw lightsabers as real and not just flashlights that take no effort whatsoever to wield. I love how I felt so much was at stake when they fought, how emotionally and physically drained they were. In the other two trilogies, nobody broke a sweat. I love every single Star Wars movie and show, including most of the animated stuff. The sequels are a feast for the senses, in my opinion, and the dialogue is probably too deep for some Star Wars fans. Whew, harsh. And I believe most of the hate comes from people who can't handle seeing a female lead that is often shown to be stronger than the males. She is also fully clothed the whole time. Her sexuality was not a selling point, like was done with both Leia and Padme. I tend to disagree, but I understand what you're saying with regard to that. The metal bikini and some of the more scantily clad outfits that George had Padme in. I never saw it as that being a selling point, but at the same time, a 13-year-old young Jon Justice was more than happy to see Princess Leia in that metal bikini. Either way, Elsa, thank you so much for the comments. And if you haven't had the chance to go and check out that particular one-off show, the greatest Star Wars love story ever told, just head on over to the YouTube page or look through the archives on whatever app you happen to be listening to this show on. Again, I want to remind you that if you happen to be in the St. Paul, the Twin Cities, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, make plans to come on out and join us tomorrow, October 21st at the Starcade, noon until 2. And if you want details on that, just drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. I will be selling my books there on site, but if you'd like to pick up your copy and you don't live in Minneapolis, you can do that by also emailing me, and you can now purchase paperbacks and hardcovers directly from me, cheaper than what you will buy on Amazon.com. You can also get all 7 books in the series on Amazon.com in paperback or hardcover, but you can also get them in audiobook and ebook. You can actually pick up the entire 7-story complete saga in an ebook box set, priced lower than what you would pay for all 7 of them separately. That's all available at Amazon.com. Get the girl, kill the bad guys, save the future. For Taft Guardia, if only it were that easy. Taft picked the right day to upgrade his beloved ship when fellow pilot Kate Amaro arrived, needing his help investigating a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father. After he agrees to help, they embark on their quest, unaware that an industrial accident inside a D-Corp military and civilian spacecraft factory has set off a catastrophic chain of events. As the ruthless leader of D-Corp attempts to exploit the disaster and gain control, Taft and Katha discover what may be the only hope of saving Earth's evacuees. With everything that he holds dear at risk, can Taft stop the forces of D-Corp before it's too late? Treat yourself or a friend or a family member. Support my nerd world with science fiction, written for adults but great for ages 11 and older. Pick up whatever book you want in the 7-book series today. If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic, filled with romance and action, then EMBARK is perfect for you on Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. So nice I had to do it twice because I got to the end of the first time and my recording crashed on me. I hope wherever you are happy, you're healthy, and you are safe. I'll talk to you again next week, and hopefully see you tomorrow at Starcade in St. Paul. Talk to you then. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.